What is the Lafaya Way?
Okay. So the Lafayette Way is what I call now an advanced relational philosophy that I've learned is very, very useful and productive for working with children who are on the autism spectrum. And also that now that's kind of where I got my start is with working with autism spectrum disorder. But what I learned was this works for moderate to severe social, emotional, and behavioral disorders. So that's kind of the way I've kind of coined it. Overall, it works for hypersensitive people. Okay.
Right.
And people, I've been told not to use that term because people don't know it well, but I have to because it's what I'm trying to get the message out, that breakout message that there are some lots and lots of people out there, lots of children out there who are not diagnosed. They either are misdiagnosed, overly diagnosed, or all the gamut, right?
Yeah.
And so now I just like to use hypersensitive because hypersensitive people are just people that are just a little bit more or a lot bit more sensitive to stimuli, and more reactive to stimuli that maybe others wouldn't consider upsetting. Okay. And so we can find that in any relationship, right? So if you're fighting with someone else, then you're going to run into some hypersensitivity with the person you're interacting with. And so, but in this case, I use hypersensitive because when we're dealing with, especially the autism spectrum, there are some things that we're missing out there when I started to do the research into how to do the work.
Right.
And so originally when I started, and this was when I say originally, I mean about 20 years ago,
Yeah.
when I started the work, then I went out and I read what the things that I would read, they didn't quite connect with the experiences that I was having with the kids. They say, they're just completely, just removed, completely disconnected. And what I found was that they were so connected that they were overwhelmed,
Mm.
so they were actually taking in the feeling energies of other people all the time. And so this is what would cause them to kind of push away, like, nope, too much stimulation. And I think now there's a better understanding that there's overstimulation. We talk a lot about sensory issues and all of that, but there is also, even beyond, and actually not beyond sensory issues, just not a thing that's brought up, kind of that sixth element where we're looking into the feeling energies of others. So but that's kind of where I based it off of.
And is that um taking in all that, is that painful?
It's extremely painful. It's painful. It's overwhelming, and it's exactly why you get a lot of the attempts to isolate. And it gets very deep. I think some of the ways that I was able to kind of grab some of the concept was I made a term emotion soaking, which is just kind of the unintentional sponging of others' energy. Now, the interesting part is you get that with, say, your empath. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of
I was
information out there
just going
now.
to ask that.
Uh-huh. There's a lot of information out there right now about the empath, but there's another side to it. Like even that has its spectrum. So there's a side of it where you're dealing with your empath who is like overly putting themselves into other people's shoes, so much so that they're kind of taken advantage of a lot. They try to fix everything and they're just completely overwhelmed by
Yeah.
the things that are happening in the world. But there's also that other side, which is where I get into the hypersensitivity, where an empath is hypersensitive in their own way. Okay. And then you have those others who are taking in all of this energy, all of this, especially negative energy from others, and they're completely overwhelmed and constantly isolating and constantly finding ways, and it's tough, and I have a hard time with some of the wording we have to use here, but finding ways, not on purpose, but this is kind of an emotional thing, to shut other people out. And so even so much so where there's not the development of, say, things like language and such with autism spectrum, because they're so overstimulated by people coming at them that they are pushing away so much that that ability to mirror, and then get into, there's lots of conversation about that, but there's the development of the proper amount of mirror neurons is it's kind of a big thing there in that
Yeah.
biological piece. But there's also just this attempt to escape the overstimulation. And
Mm.
so then there's things that seem to be missing in the way of learning some of the things that we need to socialize with others.
Yeah. And I read about highly sensitive people and empaths, and you can be both, but they're not necessarily both, are they?
Exactly. They're not exactly necessarily both. And my biggest goal is to really kind of get the information out there so that some of the kids out there who are highly sensitive yet highly intelligent, and they're not having success in their social environments, especially for me, kind of my sweet spot is in the schools
Mm.
where they're being, they're being teased, they're being bullied, they're being and I always say in quotes, treated, not intentionally sometimes, but they're being mistreated by parents and teachers because they have no idea what to do with some of the overstimulated kids. Because then some of their behaviors will look like acting out. Their behaviors will look like, they're oppositional or defiant, I really want people to kind of grasp the understanding of the concepts that I'm sharing so that our kids can stop suffering so much.
So if, for instance, I suddenly came into contact with somebody, maybe somebody I didn't know, in a situation in a shop or something, and they behaved, in that manner towards me, and I could feel that it wasn't somebody that was just being rude, but there was something else. What would my best action be with that person? How could I help them with
Okay.
my actions?
Okay, so first I have to say that we may discuss this a little bit later,
Oh,
but
sorry.
the concept of rude is a concept that we could, as a society, maybe work on a little, because the biggest piece is most people no, and I would venture to say, and know people hate this, but no person wishes to be disliked. Okay,
Mm,
if they appear to behave as if they wish to be disliked, they are engaging in self-sabotaging behavior. We've learned that from the very beginning of life. It is our innate desire to connect
yeah,
to others. Now, if there's a break in that, if there's a breach in that, then of course there's a lot of things that can happen from that, like a lot of acting out behavior due to the deep hurt that comes from being unable to connect in the way that we were innately made to do.
mm,
Okay, so if we think back, and anybody with the Psych 101, all the psych kids out there, if we took a Psych 101 class, we learned at some point about the orphanage studies where the babies who actually they were fed, but no one ever came into, they never had that human contact, they
yeah,
would still turn over and die, just because that piece that's required in us was missing. Okay. And so that's how deep our desire, we're made to connect with one another. Most of us know that, but some,
yeah,
some don't. But anyway, okay. If you come across a person that it's clear that through their actions, they're not meaning, and it's tough because mine is actually for the kids who it appears as if they mean to be rude.
mm,
It appears as if they mean, so it's very difficult to try to make that distinction. So if you come across a person who is being rude, whether intentionally or unintentionally, then the way that you deal with that is first you learn how not to judge. That's one piece.
yeah,
So you work on not judging that. You move into the space of, oh, poor thing, they work against themselves if they would like for others to be able to connect with them, right? If we move into that thinking space, it really changes the way that we actually respond to people. And so then you're coming from a space of, okay, I know that you're a human being just like I am. So let's try to interact in a way where you can get your needs met and I can get mine met. So it just makes a shift in kind of that internal dialogue that you have. So then your feeling energy toward them, because now we're talking about, and getting back to the hypersensitive individual, now your feeling energy toward them will be one of peace as opposed to one of frustration, irritation, and that, I think we'll probably get into the 4 steps of the Lafayette Way, but that's getting into actually engaging with the first step of the Lafayette Way, which is to find your calm. Because when you're dealing with a hypersensitive individual, if internally, because lots of people, they have lots of words to use that sound proper, But if you are not internally at peace, if you're not doing okay internally, then the hypersensitive individual will feel into that energy and continue to have that bad reaction to you.
Right. So it's very much the feeling that you give is received no matter what words you use.
Yes, yes. And it's really important. And this is important. And I know, and I've been told by many, because I, that my area has been working with a hypersensitive individual, but I've been told by people that this works in my marriage, this works on the job, this work, because it's overall an advanced relational philosophy, but it's especially important to use for the hypersensitive individual who is going to be highly reactive
Mm,
to your experience.
yeah. And do you know, when I used to teach people to drive, even people who wouldn't be classed as highly sensitive, in the situation of learning to control a car, they were suddenly hypersensitive.
So that's it. So when you're dealing with anxiety provoking situations, or I mean, it could be it when we say anxiety provoking situations, of course, driving is very scary. So, that's the big, but even things like just, looking at the old 12 step halt check in, just being extra hungry, hangry, or angry, something triggered you, right? Or lonely, or, for kids, bored or tired
Yeah.
can kind of trigger some of that hypersensitivity in people.
Yeah.
And so, it's really important to understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be a person who is consistently hypersensitive that these concepts work for. It
Mm,
could be for these situations that provoke some of that sensitivity.
yeah. And not to make a generalization, but don't you find that young guys try to really sort of bluster it off?
They try to what? I'm sorry.
You know, be full of bluster,
Oh yes, of course.
you know. So, and yet underneath, there's that real fear.
Yes, yes. And so, and then if we're looking into, oh gosh, okay, so that just segues right into step two.